Let's go.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Zephyr's Adjusted for Risk podcast from the shores of Lake Tahoe. I'm Ryan Nauman, the market strategist here at Zephyr. We have another fantastic show lined up today, and one that I'm really excited for. There is a customer journey in every type of business. Well, that customer journey is evolving in financial services as wealth is being transferred to younger investors, while women are in the process of controlling the majority of assets. Well, I have on the perfect guest to talk about this customer journey for RIAs and the role marketing plays during this journey. But first, today's episode is sponsored by the award winning Zephyr, which helps investment professionals make more informed investment decisions. I would like to give a very warm welcome to John Swystun. John is the founder and CEO at Auxesys. I first met John at this past spring at the Wealth Management Edge event in Florida. He was everywhere, taking videos of every session, every reception. I wonder if he had a twin because the guy was everywhere, capturing all the great moments, and he didn't miss a beat. His energy was fantastic, and then I found out his background was in snowboard video production. And I thought, all right, I got to get this guy on the podcast. So here we are, a few months later. John, thank you so much for coming on the show. It's such an honor to have you on. Can you please tell us a little bit more about yourself and Auxesys? And maybe just cut straight to how do you go from snowboard video production to being a well-respected and the go-to voice in the RIA space?
Oh, it's quite the mystery. I'm still trying to figure it out myself. How do I wind up here? I feel honored as well. Thank you so much for the invite. Like from meeting you and generating, relationship with you, it's been, just fantastic and so cool and very cool to see that there are some like-minded people in the space and some people with a bit of action sports background. What happened to me was, I was brought up in a family surrounded by professionals. Father was a lawyer of 30 years, also an engineer. Mother was a VP at a big four. If you went out to my aunts and uncles, some of them founded wealth management firms and they were tax lawyers and all sorts of stuff. And somehow at the age of 10, I fell in love with snowboarding here in my hometown of Winnipeg. And Winnipeg, if you're unfamiliar, is flat as all get out, colder than you can imagine, and icy beyond belief, like the worst conditions for snowboarding. And yet still, at about 10 years old, snowboarding, I was hooked. And around the same time, I became hooked on multimedia. The dial-up was in the den, and I had to get a video camera and shoot me and my buddies. And then it was the non-linear editor, and then building websites and all of these things in the realm of multimedia and web media. And at 19, I tried a year of university, but I decided I'm making a go for it. So I moved out west. I eventually moved to Whistler, which is like the mecca of professional snowboarding. And I had a good 15-year run out in the mountains. But my professional family members were all wondering, John, what are you doing? Like, this is a career? And I'll just be honest, I'll shoot from the hip. Like, yeah, it was a profession, but it was just as much, if not more, an excuse to snowboard as much as I could and party a lot. Like, it's fun, right? To do those things. And, fast forward 15 years, it turned out, yes, all my family members were right. And running a snowboard video production company is not the best long-term career or financial strategy. So, I was taking business admin courses in North Vancouver at the time, moved back to Winnipeg, got accepted into Asper. I had to reinvigorate my professional network here in Winnipeg. So I joined every extracurricular debate club, case competitions. I did a CFA Global Challenge, okay. And I thought I would be a CFA. I've had a long held interest in finance and the markets, and obviously professional services. And, I was pursuing that path towards accreditation. And I was lucky enough the two things happened at that time. First, I developed a really strong relationship with a mentor who I'm so lucky to have with me to this day. Jeff Gilbert, who's principal at the Office of the Auditor General here in Manitoba. And he actually took the time to get to know me, and he said, John, you can't do a designation. You're a founder, you're an entrepreneur, being chained to analysis desk or audit desk or anything like that in the accreditation world will eat you alive. And then the other thing that was happening at that time was I used to do corporate video production and cover conferences and all sorts of stuff in my snowboard days to pay the bills and keep the wheels turning. And when I moved back to Winnipeg, I swore off it. I said, no more freelance, no more gig, no more, weird little jobs to shoot stuff. But through, the first couple of years back in Winnipeg, work started to land on my desk. And it started with, hey, can you build out a financial model and projections for us to get some financing to buy a dental practice? Can you build a website for us? Somebody else says, can you implement a CRM? Can you generate leads for us online? Can you produce video for a computer science lab? And all this stuff happened. And I never intended to found Auxesys. The market asked me to found Auxesys. So, about 2 years of doing that contract work again, it was obvious. My wife and I, who was my girlfriend at the time, we went on a trip, and she said, John, there's something here. You got to go for it. And so Auxesys was born about
Awesome.
6.5 years ago.
I love it. First of all, video production and snowboard. I love watching my son, who said we love sitting back and watching snowboard videos, skiing videos. And I often think the video product, those photographers, they got to be just as good snowboarders or skiers as the people you're filming to like do some of the gnarly stuff that they're doing. It's amazing. So basically what you're telling me is you want to be the next Warren Miller.
Well, yeah, I wanted to be the next Mac Dog Productions.
Yeah.
Warren Miller in the ski world, revered, great respect for him, and very similar stuff I was doing in the snowboard world. And so that was the goal. And, I realized I didn't really close the loop on how I got into the RIA space, but you let me know where you want me to go from here.
Yeah. Well, we should. I would love that we could talk about snowboarding and trips and all that stuff all day long. We need to get you out here to go for a little trip out here to Kirkwood, my favorite. But anyways.
Oh, let's snowboard and talk RIA on the chairlift.
There we go. Exactly. Maybe we can write it off. Business.
Exactly, right?
You often talk a lot about and you create a lot of content regarding the hyper boutique RIA. In fact, you wrote a book titled The Hyper Boutique RIA. So let's start by explaining what is a hyper boutique RIA and how does it differ from just a typical RIA?
Yeah, the hyper boutique RIA, I'm not sure if one actually exists. I think there are some candidates that are close, very close, and some people and firms who very much seem to be on track to be one or become one, and have the principles and values, and the practice management and other variables that make them prime candidates. But a hyper boutique RIA is an aspirational concept of the sort of RIA that achieves hyper growth or close to hyper growth, and hyper growth being a concept borrowed from largely technology and software as a service and these sorts of things. Like many SaaS startups and scale ups, they achieve 40%, 50%, 60% year over year growth. And obviously we there's great discussion about yearly average organic growth rates in RIA. So that's one of the hallmarks of the hyper boutique RIA. I think part and parcel to that is incredible client service and client satisfaction. Okay. And I think that those two are extremely tightly positively correlated. You cannot get one without the other, in my humble opinion.
You're exactly correct.
Yeah, those are the big two hallmarks. And then, as I made my foray into the RIA space, really, we are, who are we? We're outsiders. I'm from Winnipeg. We're Canadians. I don't have a ton of track record in the RIA space. But the thought leadership in the space is so rich. Mm-hmm. And I think that that's a function of big problems to solve. And amazing people are drawn to the space. And a lot of that thought leadership opened up my eyes to a potential path forward for this hyper boutique. With all of the consolidation and outside capital and private equity and aggregation happening in the space, we know that there's something that makes RIA an independent RIA very special, especially when compared to the wirehouse, to the broker dealer, to the bank. And in my estimation, I think that a big part of that is IAR independence, advisor independence, and I think that it's the real calling card of why would somebody break away. Maybe I get to own my upside, or maybe I get to operate more independently. And so in my mind, the hyper boutique RIA is one that grows at rates that rate bust industry averages, organic growth. It's one that has, far and away industry leading levels of client satisfaction. And it's one that may even scale to become a national enterprise like firm, multi-office, multi-state, but still retains that boutique feeling that both the advisors and the clients really love and care for, and really helps differentiate them from some of those other models in the space.
Fantastic. I love it. I love that term. I think it's great. I think it's
Thank
great.
you very much.
We talked about the wealth transfer at the opening. How has the shift in demographics and in that change in asset ownership modernized the client journey? In your book, you talk a lot about that modernized client journey. How has that shift in demographics adjusted it, and how do financial advisors have to adjust with it?
Well, I'm going to approach this one from a slightly different angle, if that's okay, to give some context here. So much of my experience and what I draw from in building our services here at Auxesys is influenced by software as a service.
Okay.
The SaaS business model, enterprise SaaS, and really, in my estimation, what hyper growth achieving SaaS figured out 15, 20 years ago was that you need to treat your digital marketing portfolio like an investment portfolio. It is an investment portfolio, and you need to diversify it. You need to balance it. You need to chase an efficient frontier. Different assets and platforms and activities, they have different risk profiles, and they have different input requirements and different ROI expectations. And so SaaS, really what they figured out is, first you have to apply money brain, investment brain to digital marketing, and you have to hedge the risk of some platforms and activities with the performance and stability of others. And then the other thing that they came to was that we need to speak to people who are much earlier in the modern client journey, and the technology is a wonderful way to be able to do that. So for folks who don't really know what the options are in the realm of wealth management or financial advisory, it's a great example. We can speak to folks who are way earlier in the journey, and that does bring demographics into play, because obviously, by and large, younger people are earlier in the journey. But that SaaS experiment over the last 20 years, they have gotten so good at this. And maybe I'll use the example of investment platforms or robo advisory and some of these platforms. I think RIAs look at many of them and they think, oh my gosh, how can we compete? They have great SEO, or they have 200,000 Instagram followers and all the rest of it. And what I see is not that. It's not the fact that they have a crazy LinkedIn followership that is an order of magnitude better than most RIAs. It's not that. It's the fact that they have very deliberately selected assets and activities, each designed to speak to different stages of the modern client journey. And they're all kind of linked together hand in glove, striking towards that unified goal of, like I say, tightly correlated high growth, high organic growth, and amazing client experience and prospect experience too, right? So obviously, with the great wealth transfer and with the biggest economic driver in history being this demographic shift, activating the public by and large and folks who are at the earliest stages of wealth accumulation is critical. But I also would like to contrast that and say that even the elder generations, the greatest generation and the baby boomers, the last 15 years, their experience of the client journey has drastically changed. And even, older high net worth and ultra high net worth individuals, the way that they become aware of, build their assessment of the reputation of a professional service provider, of an RIA, of a private wealth management practice or advisors is completely different. It is absolutely completely different, and the digital experience is pervasive. It
Mhm.
informs and influences absolutely everything, and there's a reason why the social media platforms, the ad platforms, they're some of the best business models in the world, is because they are so good at speaking to and activating that internal psychology, and subconsciously influencing, sometimes unethically, but in my opinion, the best marketing is the most ethical versions of doing that because it can be done ethically.
I love it. You were really speaking to my heart there when you were talking about the efficient frontier and
Mhm.
risk return analysis and correlations. And I was like, all right, John, let's go there. But you talked about, mentioned getting found for RIAs and you talked in your book too about that client journey. And one of the first stages was the awareness stage in that client journey. And I feel as if just getting found in this, very large sea of competition can be very difficult. What are some ways RIAs can, bring more awareness to their practice and ultimately result in more lead generation?
This one, I hold many contrarian opinions in this
I
topic.
love contrarian thought. So bring it, John.
RIAs striking for rate busting organic growth, meaning they're above current industry averages of we hear talk at about 3%, which in light of inflation and in light of the business model that if we're fee based should be driving organic growth just with gains.
Mhm.
Uh, if you're chasing 8, 10, 15, 20% year over year organic growth, you definitely need a better, more diverse mix of stuff happening online that is going to, to use the term, crack the top of the funnel open much wider. And I love what so much of the RIA space is doing right now, and they are leaning heavily into earned and shared media, and what we are doing as an example of it right now. To see all of these RIAs starting podcasts and leaning into LinkedIn and social media, and doing all of these things is wonderful. But there is an unfortunate element of that, the risk profile, the return profile of those sorts of activities is they can crack the top of the funnel open a bit wider, but it is so highly competitive. The spoils go to a very few when you play that game. And we've heard all the statistics about how long average podcasts last, and you are probably an outlier, and how hard it is to actually get meaningful metrics on your podcast. And so to pair up that sort of activity with, especially, and this is partially contrarian, paid ad is one of the best ways to build awareness. Now, I don't want to be simplistic here. There's a lot of other stuff that can help. And in my opinion, if you do it properly and you chase that efficient frontier, the difference with digital marketing assets and activities is, if you have a bunch of investments, generally their performance isn't really going to affect each other too much.
Mhm.
In digital marketing, if you have great online reputation, if you have great findability in SEO, if you have great shared and earned media performance, social media and appearances and the like, all that can have a multiplicative effect on the performance of paid media channels. And so I think what a lot of RIAs are going to realize, and CMOs and CGOs especially, is that the the input required to crack the top of the funnel open, to a certain width, it's limited. It can only get so
Mhm.
far, and it takes so much input. Firsthand how many hours and toiling it takes to produce a podcast and be consistent with it. And I think once RIA really gets turned on to paid online ad, they will realize, wow, it takes us, X input to generate 100,000 impressions on LinkedIn, let's say, whereas on paid ad channels, we can do that for pennies on the dollar. And we can access pockets of audiences that would be completely inaccessible through those other channels. And then we can build that journey. We can remarket to, and we can follow those audiences around the web, and we can present stuff that speaks to them, that speaks to what they're already thinking. And that's the ethical part, is if we build the garden and attract the butterflies, as opposed to trying to swing the butterfly net around haphazardly, the movement through the modern client journey is that much better and more enjoyable for the prospect or the client. And then once stuff hits the sales pipeline, that's where the real magic happens, is that people are entering the sales pipeline persuaded, already knowing about the philosophy and the values and the differentiators of the RIA and their advisors, and the close rates are better, the pipeline velocity is better, and the advisor mojo just gets the boost because they're not banging their head against the wall with poor close rates or resistance. Is you get the feeling that people in your sales pipeline are there because they want to be there, not because they were convinced somehow, pitch slap to take a meeting, that they want to be there.
That's awesome. I love the outside the box thinking, because I feel as if in this industry that's good. We often, you talked about it too at the opening, being in snowboard video production, it's kind of a closed in group. RIAs, I feel as if we're finally learning about, SaaS companies using things that are outside to enhance that client experience. It's so important. And we're going to maybe, non-traditional, more technology firms, and how do they enhance the client experience? How can we enhance the client experience? And it just makes it so much better for the end investor, the client, when we can do that.
There's a concept that I think briefly might be worth bringing up here that I think is really important for RIAs to look into, if I may.
Yeah.
15 years ago, the founders of HubSpot basically invented the term RevOps, revenue operations. And it was a beast of necessity because, like I say, they basically applied money brain to their digital marketing portfolio. They chased an efficient frontier. And what they found, that they built assets and activities for all stages of the modern client journey, not just trying to find people who were ready to buy or looking for a meeting. And what they found was they built a big pipeline of leads that were very excited to engage in conversation. And they realized, oh my gosh, we're not operating efficiently enough to capture as much value from that pipeline, that lead flow, those audiences as we possibly can. So they invented the discipline of RevOps, and it's the integration of sales, marketing, operations, and client success. And so if you go to SaaS conferences, you will hear them nowadays, it's bread and butter table stakes. They're talking about RevOps all day long. I envision a world for RIA, a time for RIA. I believe it's going to happen in the next 2-3 years, where you go to a conference and you hear people on a panel in RIA talk about growth, and they are talking about RevOps, because they've figured out how to turn that growth trend in the other direction. And now they have the opposite problem. Oh my gosh, now we have so much interest and so many people wanting to book meetings and so many people wanting to move through the pipeline that we need to enhance our operations to be more efficient and capture as much value from that as we possibly can.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing that. Fantastic. I'm going to go look it up right now when we get off this. We're done recording. Last question here real quick. And you mentioned digital marketing plan, and this is your bread and butter, digital marketing. What's the most important things to consider when a financial advisor, RIA, wants to implement a digital marketing plan?
This is a very tough question, and I hope to be able to answer this succinctly. I really think values and philosophy and ethics are at the core of everything. How do you want to act in the market? How do you want to be perceived? And really, are you willing to do what is right versus what is expedient? if you are building a digital marketing portfolio and you think to yourself, we want leads, we want meetings, you may juice performance in the short term. But if you want to do what's right and what's ethical and avoid what is expedient and not just bolster growth in the short term, but everybody talks about cracking the code for organic growth. In my mind, cracking the code for to organic growth means that you build a machine that brings you stable, sustainable, predictable, reliable organic growth year over year for a decade plus. That's, I think, the key. So I really think it's mindset is at the core, philosophy, values, ethics. And then the other thing, and this is a big contrarian opinion of mine, is, I think in professional services and with other marketing service providers, so often the advice that we hear is to start from the inside out. And what most say that means is lean into what you're already doing and make that better. So lean into your referral program, your COIs, trying to increase wallet share, trying to win over successors, all of these things. And then they say, once you start doing a better job of that, then go one channel on a time, layer on one additional channel, start a social media playbook, start a podcast playbook, do all these things, improve the website, do webinars or seminars and stuff like that. And that contrarian opinion is very difficult, and that can actually hurt you more than help you, even if you could do a good job of layering on those channels. I call it coats of paint marketing. You paint a wall in another coat of paint. Is it good enough? Did we get where we need? Another coat of paint. Is it good enough? And so at Auxesys, our philosophy really is that in order to kick that growth curve, that trajectory in the other direction, we need to build from the bottom up, and we need to build in an integrated fashion. So I really think for RIAs who are extremely ambitious and ready to invest seriously in this, you need to start from the bottom and build an extremely solid marketing plan. We have outlines of exactly what that means in the Hyper Boutique RIA guide. You need to get the entire tech stack set up properly, the MarTech stack. Most RIAs have about 5% of this, 10% of this. You need about 40 pieces of software for managing the data flow, for capturing value online, for following audiences around. You need to get all of that set up, configured, and integrated properly, like beautifully. Then you need all the fundamental assets and activities going. And like I say, they have a multiplicative effect on each other. Listings, reputation management, technical, on-page, off-page SEO. And it's daunting, right? For an RIA who's ambitious, you look at all these things, you go, what even are all of these things? And that's where I think the big thing comes in. It's really a who question. How are you going to do it? Are you going to build the internal team? It can be done. If you're going to build the internal team, cross-industry thinking. Go and find marketing experts in SaaS who have helped other industries achieve hypergrowth and bring their thinking into your RIA. Or go and find agencies that maybe have a bit of experience in RIA and financial services, but have helped organizations achieve 40, 50, 60% year over year growth. Bring that type of thinking into your organization, whether you bring it internal or you work with a growth partner, but it's as much a who question as it is a how.
I love it. I love it. John, I would love to have you on again. You have so much great insight to share. So many multiple episodes worth of insight, and I would love to hear some great stories. Maybe we have to have you on for an after dark adjusted for risk episode to hear some good snowboarding stories and what goes along with it. Thank you, John, so much for coming on the show. It was such an honor, such a fun conversation. Thank you for sharing such great insight. We need to have you on again to dig a little bit deeper because there's a lot to talk about. Where can our audience get more information about Auxesys?
A great place to start is to come find me on LinkedIn. Hopefully my name is in the show notes, so plug that into LinkedIn. It's a weird one to spell. Shoot me a DM. I like to talk. I like to hang. You can also go to our company's website. The spelling is equally as weird as my name. It's AUXESYS.com. That actually means Organic Growth Systems. So if you plug that in, auxesys.com, you'll find a page that's all about what we're up to in the RIA space that gives you an opportunity to claim an executive workshop if you want to get your leadership involved in a conversation about pursuing the Hyper Boutique RIA strategy. And yeah, that's a great place to start. And I wanted to share my gratitude back with you, Ryan. Thank you so much for having me on the show. What an honor. It's been great to hang with you. I'm excited to continue to foster a relationship with you. Like I say, hopefully we get to talk RIA and slash some POW turns at some point in the future. And I really want to double down on this. I think what you are doing is fantastic, having a digital marketer onto a show that maybe is more traditionally about investment analysis and research and platforms and technology. I really think if audience members can leave today with one thing in their head, is that although some of the nuance and the jargon of digital marketing is esoteric and strange and scary, so many people in the RIA space are already experts at this. Digital marketing is an investment portfolio. It has many similar features and considerations. And so thinking about, building and managing a portfolio and chasing an efficient frontier and all these core fundamental ideas, it is very much a lot of the same stuff. There's a whole section in the book about how you are already a marketing expert. And I'm so excited to see where this industry goes with the leadership of folks like you helping bring these two worlds together. So thank you from the bottom of my heart, man.
Well, fantastic, John. I know. Thank you for coming on. That is such a great way of bringing it all together. You're right. At my heart, I love investments. That's where this podcast started 2 years ago, was talking about investments and analytics and so on. It's veered a little bit. We've had a lot of people coming on talking about marketing and more about business practice. What are the best practices? How do you build the practice? And I'm biased. I personally think the investment management piece is the most important, but really it's not. It's the marketing, and financial advisors, they love the investment management piece, but it's the marketing piece that might be more difficult for them, but arguably the most important. So, it's your insight that really can help financial advisors, RIAs, learn more about marketing, because arguably it's the most important piece, getting people through that door, more important than picking the best mutual fund. So awesome,
Well, thank you,
John.
man.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone, for joining and listening to this episode of Zephyr's Adjusted for Risk podcast. You can watch all previous episodes on the Zephyr YouTube channel, as well as on iHeartRadio and Spotify. Thank you very much, and have a great rest of your week.